I'm sitting over there. So welcome everybody to Mary Geisman's apartment. Where is Mary? Mary, where are you?
Yeah.
There she is. Thank you, Mary, for having us. We're
In this splendid. Thank you.
And this is a gathering for Peace Action New York State. I think we sent you a few emails. Just to point out a few people before I introduce Blanche. There, Emily Rubino, way back there. Come on, Emily.
Yeah, come up, Emily.
We may have you say something.
No,
so
we definitely want you to speak.
Yeah, so.
Not now, but.
Okay, but wind your way, right? And there's Margaret Engel, who's the student coordinator, student and campaign coordinator. And the person with the cell phone here, Ashley Crowther, is responsible for the beautiful emails that talk about Crystal Eastman and many other things, all our social media. We worship Ashley,
Emily,
and
Margaret.
And I want to introduce Sylvia Rodriguez Case, who is the chair of Peace Action Fund of New York State. And we are honored to have Jim Anderson here, who is the president of Peace Action New York State. Now, it's very confusing. We have two organizations. One that is our chapter group. So Jim Anderson is head of our chapter group that does all the lobbying and political work. And then we have the fund, the Peace Action Fund, that's a 501c3 that does the student organizing and helps pay the salaries, important things like that. So, we have these two organizations. This always confuses everybody, but we're not the only peace action group like that, an advocacy group like that. Let's see, so who else should I be introducing?
Well, this is Sally Jones.
Oh, I am Sally Jones.
Who, for many years, was our president and is our leader in many ways.
Yeah, I am the president of sending you emails, but Sylvia has taken over as chair of Peace Action Fund of New York State, and I promised to help her. So that's, and she's doing a great job. So we also have Tara Curry. Where are you? Tara Curry, who's the downstate co-chair of Peace Action New York State and also on the fund board. Is David here? David. If you're on the board of the fund or on, one of the leaderships, just raise your hand. Joanne, where are you?
Joanne is.
Joanne Robinson.
Joanne Robinson.
And her indomitable sister Roberta. Where's Roberta? Here. There. Roberta's over there.
And they're twins. We just discovered.
And David Jones and myself, we're on, the board, and we all work together. We've gotten very friendly, and we took over Mary's apartment today and had a good time. And now I would like to introduce the star of the evening, Blanche Wiesen Cook, who's also on our board. We were very lucky that you decided to join us, who is an activist, a historian, a professor, and a very important biographer of Eleanor Roosevelt. Some of us have read the biographies, and she's going to explain the work that she did many, many years ago. And I got to, when I didn't know anything about Crystal Eastman, but you gave me a book, or somehow I got the book. And I just want to say that if you, after hearing about this, you want a book, there's a sign-up sheet over there, and we're ordering books. The publisher has changed their system, so we weren't able to get books ahead of time. So put your name there, and when we get the books, we'll let you know, and we can bill you and mail you the book. So just I want to put that in your heads. So, Blanche, I'm going to turn this over to you, and thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much I'm very moved to be here at Peace Action with so many great peace activists sitting here. Alice Slater, who you all know, banned the bomb, and Kathleen Walsh, Darcy, and Maeve, and Claire Koss. I just want to say, Claire and I met in 1966, working against the war in Vietnam at a WiLPF meeting, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. And what's great about Peace Action is that Peace Action is an umbrella organization that does so much that organizations like Women's Strike for Peace and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom used to do. They still exist, but they're not doing it. What is so interesting about Crystal Eastman is that she is the founder of several organizations, the ACLU and the Women's Peace Party in World War I, which became the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. And what's really amazing about Crystal Eastman is when I put this book together, people said, we don't know who she is. She's never written anything. What she's written has never been published. And that was ridiculous. And I found her working on my dissertation I was the only woman in the history department at Johns Hopkins University, but I was very lucky to have a mentor who was a peace activist and an integrationist. And so the history department had a bail fund. We would go into downtown Baltimore and sit in and, you know, do integration things. We'd get arrested and call up the history department, and they'd send somebody down with money to bail us out. So that wasn't so bad. The bottom line is, sorry?
Jerry just said he didn't know any of that.
Well, it was a long time ago.
I was here a long time ago.
It was 1963-64 in Baltimore. And so the bottom line is my dissertation, I had a dual degree, international relations and history. It was on World War I. But then I got all involved in this group of peace people, the American Union Against Militarism. And it was that group that Crystal Eastman was a member of, and it was that group that split off into different sections because people were getting arrested, conscientious objectors, dissenters, folks who spoke out against the war were getting arrested, and she organized what ultimately became the ACLU. It wasn't initially the ACLU. So she's a fabulous visionary. In 1923, for example, she said about the Equal Rights Amendment, now this is a fight worth fighting for.
Where were we all these years?
I'm sorry.
I'm saying, where were we all these years? We
Yeah.
still don't have it?
But, in 1923, she said, now this is a fight worth fighting for, even if it takes 10 years. So I wasn't sure what I should do. Should I read a little bit from the introduction about her life, or should I read some of her articles? And I thought that it would be really interesting for Peace Action. She's Max Eastman's sister. Some of you might know Max Eastman. How many of you know Max Eastman? One person. Okay. He was a great writer. he was a great writer, and he organized a journal called The Masses. And then there was The Liberator, and she was co-owner of The Masses and The Liberator. These are the 1920s organizations. So she's an equal rights feminist, she is a socialist, and she is a pacifist. And it's really thrilling to see what's going on now. We have a movement
And we need that.
that is now uniting. I mean, the vision of having a world movement that unites these interests, and, you know, that's what we need, a global movement for peace and a global movement for justice and economic security. It's called Peace and Socialism. And of course, women's rights. She spent a lot of time in England. She married a man who moved to England, and so she moved to England, and she got all involved with Time and Tide and Lady Rhonda and the British feminist peace movement. So for those, I mean, there's a lot of interest around the world in those movements now, Lady Rhonda and so on. So let me just, I think what I should do is read some of her articles on peace, just so you get a sense of what a great writer and visionary she was. She wrote an article published in the New Republic, 24 July 1915, to make war unthinkable during World War I. Speaking as a pacifist, with every surface appearance of common sense, you are putting the cart before the horse. People attack her for that. Beyond advocating what is an inherent and inevitable part of the pacifist platform, in other words, a non-aggressive national policy, it is not necessary for the peace movement to concern itself in the first instance with questions of international policy. National disputes will arise. They are unavoidable so long as separate nations exist. Our concern is with the method of settling those disputes. Our function is to establish new values, to create an overpowering sense of the sacredness of life, so that war will be unthinkable, so that when international disputes arrive, even of the most grave character, when lives have been lost, when our rights have been clearly invaded, we shall not turn to wholesale, deliberate destruction of life as the means of settling those disputes, of avenging those deaths, of asserting those rights. Our function is to devise the substitute or substitutes for war, to start the political genius of the world thinking, inventing along this line. We did not wait for the last word on individual rights before establishing courts to adjudicate them. Quarreling persists among men, but dueling has been abolished. Pacifist agitation is directed primarily, and rightly, I think, against the prevailing archaic and barbarous method of determining international disputes. No amount of wisdom and forbearance and generosity will prevent disputes arising. The flag will be insulted here and there. Boundary questions will come up. Trade disputes will arise. American lives will be lost. The national honor will be offended to the end of time or for centuries to come. Let us be prepared for those contingencies by all means, but prepared to meet them in a civilized, grown-up way, not by the flourish of the big stick and the slaughter of thousands. That is the pacifist's concern. Finally, the peace movement is essentially international. No world court or international federation can be established unless there is a strong desire for it in many nations. Therefore, the pacifist agitation cannot concern itself too closely with questions of purely national policy. Beyond insisting that each nation should be non-aggressive, beyond insisting that national integrity be preserved, and such trade freedom and possibility for expansion be allowed, each nation, as are necessary to its successful national existence, and asserting willingness to have these matters left to an international body in which each nation has just representation, the pacifist, it seems to me, need not concern himself or herself with national policies. Especially it is important that in the present controversy, he should not lose himself in the necessarily involved discussions of national policy. The immediate function of the pacifist in America today is to fight the agitation for increased armament as a step in the wrong direction, as a long backward step away from the achievement of ideals. We are not in any immediate danger of invasion, probably not for 10 years. During that time, we have the opportunity to inaugurate some sort of world understanding, which shall remove, once and for all, the danger of such invasion and the necessity of providing against it. If now we take the fatal step of large increase in armament, inevitably we shall arouse suspicion and unfriendliness. No nation will believe us when we talk of a democratic world federation or a league of peace. We shall have lost the opportunity of centuries. That is the pacifist's ideal reason for opposing the advocates of preparedness. His practical reason is that a big increase in armament on the part of an important neutral nation at a critical time is most obviously playing with fire. It is inviting war upon us. Very clear, a call for a League of Nations and world unity to make things happen in a federated way. I mean, imagine if the UN actually worked for peace.
Or the League of Nations.
Or the League of Nations. Yes. So,
You certainly said exactly what has to be done.
yes.
Hasn't changed.
She then did an interview with Dr. Alita Jacobs, who called the Women's Peace Congress at The Hague. And the Women's Peace Congress at The Hague had women from 88 countries, 1915. Alita Jacobs, this is also published in 1915 in the magazine called The Survey. Alita Jacobs, first woman physician of Holland, founder and head of the Dutch suffrage movement, who spent some weeks in America on a mission which brought her to the White House, was telling me how she found courage to call the Women's Peace Congress at The Hague last spring. Much has been written of that remarkable gathering, but the vigorous-minded woman who conceived it and with characteristic directness put it through is comparatively unknown to us. She is, however, one of a group of international women who are challenging public opinion with the idea of world union for peace. You see, she began at Budapest in 1913. It was agreed that we should hold the next biennial meeting of the Women's Suffrage Alliance in Berlin in 1915. The German women wanted us, but then the war came, and early last winter, a letter reached me as one of the national suffrage presidents saying that, of course, the war would make it impossible to hold the meeting in Berlin, and strongly recommending that the convention be given up. But I thought at once, just because there is this terrible war, the women must come together somewhere, some way, just to show that women of all countries can work together, even in the face of the greatest war in the world. These are the words of Dr. Aletta Jacobs. We must show that when all Europe seems full of hatred, they, the women, can remain united. I felt that the Alliance had to do that, and we should invite the Alliance to meet in Amsterdam. But several of the Allied countries voted against holding an international meeting during the war, and therefore the invitation was not accepted. I received, however, many letters of sympathy from individual women in belligerent and neutral countries, and from Inez Macmillan of England, a plan for a meeting of individuals. The other members of my board of the Suffrage Society did not agree on this plan of a Congress of individuals, but I thought it a good plan and decided to do what I could personally. I therefore invited as many women as I could in different countries to discuss together what the Congress should be and to make up the preliminary program. When the answers came, so many were in favor that I thought, now I dare to do it. This meeting was held in Amsterdam, 12 and 13 February 1915. 5 women came from Great Britain, 4 from Germany, 3 from Belgium, several from Holland, agreeing that there should be no discussion of the causes or conduct of the war, but that all minds should be concentrated on methods of bringing about peace. These pioneers made Dr. Jacobs chair of the ongoing committee, and the call went out to the women of all nations in her name. The next question put to Dr. Jacobs was this: was the Hague gathering more than a splendid expression of the growing solidarity of womankind the world over? Do you think it will lead to something constructive? Of course it will, Dr. Jacobs replied. It already has. As the convention voted it, I went with Jane Addams to carry our resolutions to the governments of Britain, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Switzerland, Italy, France, and Belgium. But when I got back to Amsterdam, the first thing I did was to open headquarters for the International Committee of Women for Permanent Peace, the permanent organization formed at the Congress, and to engage 2 secretaries to commence the work. The work we have planned is an enormous undertaking. First, we must keep up the bond between pacifist women in all countries. We must act as a clearinghouse through which they can communicate. We have already begun issuing bulletins. Here is one, for instance, telling what the Swedish women have done since the Congress, how on June 27 they held peace meetings in 343 places at one time, crowded, enthusiastic meetings, and secured the signatures of 88,784 women to our Hague revolutions. News like that, sent out to the women of other countries, will inspire them to act, and thus the organization will grow. I'm going to skip a bunch of paragraphs. There was no need to ask Dr. Jacobs whether to her mind such a Congress of women would have an influence on the deliberation of the negotiators. She goes further and believes the coming and staying of world peace will depend largely on women. When I asked her if she thought we might see the end of war in a generation or two, or if it would take centuries of education to bring it about, she said, "Oh no, women will soon have political power. Women's suffrage and permanent peace will go together." How about that for a thought? When the women of a country are eagerly asking for the vote, and a country is in a state of mind to grant the vote to its women, it is a sign that that country is ripe for permanent peace. The women will do it. They don't feel as men do about war. They are the mothers of the race. Men think of the economic results. Women think of the grief and pain and damage to the race. If we can bring women to feel that internationalism is higher than nationalism, then they won't stand by governments, they'll stand by humanity. I'm going to skip some more. Yes, that's it. The women thought of it. Well, I asked, suppose there is a neutral conference of some kind. Don't you think there should be a woman on it? Here Dr. Jacobs smiled, the knowing, tolerant smile of a mother for her boys. It made her seem less of a feminist. Men, you know, like to do things for themselves. They have more confidence in a proposal if it is made by men than if it is made by women. So we don't care so very much about having women in the conference of neutrals if only the right men can be found. That is, after all, the amazing thing about these women internationalists. They do not seem to be driven by personal ambition, and yet they tackle big, unheard-of undertakings like the Hague meeting and succeed with them. Simplicity, directness, the glorious courage of children to whom everything is possible because it is untried. These are the qualities women are bringing into the new world councils. They are priceless qualities, concludes Crystal Eastman, and the spirit of these women will be felt whether any of them receive official recognition or not. There's so many articles that I'd like to read, but I'd like to read One on.
She died.
She died very young, at the age of 48, in 1928. And alas, she died of nephritis, a kidney disease, and she drank too much. She wrote too much, she talked too much, she traveled too much, she drank too much, sort of like Winston Churchill, and died of much too much. Sorry. I wanted to read one of her wonderful articles on socialism.
We have to do that.
Sorry?
Still have to do that.
We have to do that, yeah. Okay.
We've never had it anywhere, really.
Sorry, Alice,
We've
what?
never really had it.
No, we never even tried it.
Right.
Yeah. She was close friends with Eugene Debs. Let me see if this is a good one. Don't go away. And then we could have a conversation. And then perhaps okay, this is the Socialist Party Convention, published in the Liberator, July 1920. We must make clear what kind of socialists we are. We must have a keynote in this campaign, said Holland, the clearest-headed leader of the minority in the Socialist Convention. Is the keynote to be, we are the only 100% American party destined to uphold the Constitution? But he never made clear the alternative, nor did any other member of the minority make it clear they were an earnest and honest minority, about 1/3 of the delegates, and they could see that something was wrong with the majority, but they had no firm ground of their own from which to attack it. They were soft and vague and unorganized and entirely spontaneous in their attacks. The effect of their presence was merely, therefore, to modify, in a few points, the glaringly conservative measures adopted by the majority, and lend the support of their numbers and their sincere revolutionary intention to a movement absolutely controlled and guarded by people with contrary intentions. It seems to me that the keynote of any socialist campaign at the present time must obviously concern our attitude toward the decaying institutions of political democracy. And there are just two possible attitudes. We can say something like this: despite the complete breakdown of the most essential democratic institutions during the past 4 years, commencing with the overthrow of the vital guarantees embodied in the First Amendment of the Constitution, and reaching its climax when Congress twice refused to seat a man duly elected to represent his district because he was a socialist, and when the legislative body of our largest state arbitrarily expelled 5 socialist members, thus delaying the very principle of majority representation on which the republic is founded. Nevertheless, we reaffirm our faith in democracy. We assert our abiding belief in the sacredness of its institutions. We declare that progress can continue only by a return to these institutions. And whereas all other political parties have basely forsaken the Constitution, we declare or everlasting allegiance to it. We feel ourselves called by destiny to restore political democracy and bring this erring nation back to the faith of its fathers. On the other hand, we can say something like this: the last 4 years in America have demonstrated as never before the history of the world that human liberty cannot be secured or maintained through the institution of political democracy alone. These vital safeguards of the First Amendment, never of much practical value in protecting the poorest workers, were completely abandoned by the government in the first week of war and have never been restored. Without freedom of speech, assembly, press, the principle of majority representation is a mockery. The denial of these rights is a virtual disenfranchisement of the workers. But not satisfied with this, the ruling class, by twice refusing to seat a duly elected socialist congressman and expelling 5 duly elected socialist assemblymen from the New York State legislature, has proved that any inconvenient provision of the Constitution can be set aside, and has taken a long, bold step toward openly disenfranchising all who advocate fundamental changes in the government. These developments do not surprise us. They merely confirm our opinion and serve to emphasize a cardinal point in our socialist philosophy, that the state, under capitalism, whether it be democratic or autocratic, is bound to be not a reconciler or arbiter between classes, but an agent of exploiting class. They serve to recall to reason those socialists who have put democracy before socialism, who have vainly expected the capitalist state to maintain democratic institutions against its own interest and to stand quietly by while socialists, exercising their constitutional rights, vote to destroy it. The experience of the last 4 years, which after all have been but the legal development of democracy under capitalism, have recalled us from their childlike dreams to the stern realities of the class struggle. Therefore, while we unite with all honest liberals in demanding the restoration of civil and political liberty, we know that the way to restore liberty is to destroy the capitalist system. And while we shall continue to exercise our political rights whenever and wherever a capitalist government allows us, we know that the great hope of realizing socialism lies in the leadership of the masses by the workers organized in the industrial field, and that the chief function of a political party of socialism is to define, interpret, explain the industrial struggle and educate the workers to play their historic part. The choice was made between these two possible keynotes long before the convention began. I don't want any dictatorship. And this is the keynote. I want democracy, shouted Berger. And this is Vincent Berger, the socialist leader. And what Berger says is usually what the other right-wingers think. Berger would rather go on fighting for his life and liberty and his right to sit in Congress and this capitalist democracy than take a chance under a rough and tumble working class government, and he says so. Ex-Assemblyman Waldman is also frank when he said up Albany, that he preferred the government of New York State to the Soviet government of Russia. It was not a false and cowardly omission. He knew he would find more at home, sitting on the steps at Albany, with the door shut in his face, than he would as a recallable delegate to an industrial Soviet under communism. Ex-Assemblyman Solomon's contribution at the convention was equally frank. I am proud of being 100% American. I support the Constitution. It is Sweet and Lusk who have betrayed Americanism. Indeed, the preamble of the platform itself, drafted, it is understood, by Morris Hillquit, makes the keynote of the socialist campaign quite clear. America is now at the parting of the roads. It is the outraging of political liberty and concentration of economic power. If the outraging of political liberty and concentration of economic power is permitted to go on, it can only have one consequence: the reduction of the country to a state of absolute capitalist despotism. The Socialist Party sounds the warning. It calls upon the people to defeat both old parties at the polls and to elect candidates of the Socialist Party, to the end of restoring political democracy and bringing about complete industrial freedom. And this goes on for many more paragraphs.
Same argument we're having today.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Perhaps I can skip some. Surely a socialist ought to know that the First Amendment is as good today as it ever was. And it was never any good in a crisis. It has never been proof against a strain. What?
They just did this week, they passed the FISA,
The war was a very big strain. The contest of industrial forces set going by the war is a bigger strain still. And the breakdown of democratic institutions is correspondingly more complete. Our revolutionary understanding ought also to be more complete. But the war, which brought socialists and liberals together in the fight to maintain civil liberty, was as bad for the socialists as it was good for the liberals. The fight for free speech demanded constant reference to the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. To demand that these documents be lived up to was the most revolutionary thing a socialist leader could do, except go to jail. And from demanding that they should be lived up to, some of these leaders have apparently gotten into the habit of believing they will be lived up to, and that when they are, there will be social revolution. Morris Hillquit spoke playfully, perhaps, when he said that the Socialist Party is the only conservative party in the U.S. But he stated the literal truth. The two old parties have progressed rapidly during the military and economic crisis. They have thrown over the old-fashioned political ways of thought, along with the old documents, and are bending almost all their energies to perfecting the economic dictatorship of the capitalists. The Socialist Party leaders have taken the opposite course. They have abandoned their former economic viewpoint, ceased to criticize the political forms of democracy, and taken refuge in pre-Marxian documents like the Constitution. They are the party of old-fashioned Americanism. Their preamble could be taken over verbatim by Hiram Johnson if he should bolt the Republican convention next week, and their whole program would make an excellent getting together ground for the Committee of 48, the Labor Party, and the Nonpartisan League when they meet in Chicago next July. There is something in it for everybody: cancellation of war debts, democratically elected international parliament, free trade, disarmament, and self-determination for the liberal pacifists, election and recall of federal judges, direct election and recall of president, an easier method of amending the Constitution for the civic reformers, and an anti-injunction clause, child labor, minimum wage, shorter workday provisions for labor. It goes without saying, trade with Russia, recognition of the Irish Republic, amnesty and repeal of the Espionage Act. The social worker will be glad to find government insurance covering sickness, accident, old age, unemployment. The single taxer is well provided for, and of course there is comprehensive government ownership with a sort of plum plan provision for administering publicly owned industries jointly by the government and representatives of the workers for those who are socialistically inclined. And again, it goes on for about 5 more pages, so I will. But you get the point. She's amazing, and the scope of her vision is extraordinary.
She and you
What?
are amazing. She and you are amazing.
Thank you. So questions, comments, thoughts, and one thing I want to say first is that I wrote it down so I would get it right. Emily Rubino, who has been going around talking to students all over New York State, Ashley Crowther and Margaret Engel, and you are carrying the vision of Peace Action and of all these changes around for the young people. And so I'm hoping perhaps you would say a few words.
Margaret and I will go in the main room, I guess. Thank you, Blanche, for an amazing reading. It's incredible the work that you've done, you know, your research, making sure that we know who Crystal Eastman was. I certainly wouldn't have known. And just to know that women like Crystal Eastman, like you, like Sally, Sylvia, Joanne, Tara, so many folks in this room that are older than Margaret and I have really paved the way and painted the vision that I think we're still working towards. Maybe it will be, what did Crystal Eastman say, 10 years? Maybe another 10 will get there.
This is a fight worth fighting. Life is about the struggle. Yes.
Exactly. And I'm just really honored to be in this work and working with young people, working with students, especially in this moment, who have such a clear vision and purpose, and doing what we can and sharing what we know, what we've learned from years, decades, centuries of struggle to continue to push for that vision that is so worthwhile. To recognize that it's not about nations, it's about international cooperation. It's about peace. It's about not giving money for armaments, you know? We're still in the global days of action against military spending right now. I know there were just a lot of tax day protests that illustrated how much of our money goes to the military in general, how much goes to Israel right now, committing genocide and grave human rights abuses. And yeah, it's just an honor to be part of an incredible network doing something about this. And supporting young people, I think, is like the most rewarding part of my work. I've been at this organization for 7 years. I started when I was a student. And just today, my alma mater started an encampment at Fordham University Lincoln Center. It's about 10 blocks from here. And
Right across from John Jay.
right across from John
So
Jay.
maybe-
It'll be next.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's amazing to be here with you all tonight and to be supporting such an amazing organization and continue the legacy that incredible women like Crystal Eastman really, she probably didn't even start it, right? Like she probably had women before her, but she was the first in a lot of ways, and we don't all recognize her name, but there's so many other incredible women like that whose names we might not know, but whose impact and legacy is part of our daily lives. So yeah, I mean, I didn't have anything specific prepared to say, but just listening to you speak, it's incredible how much of it is so applicable. And that's both amazing to see how kind of before her time she was, and so frustrating to see that like they were still in this fight. Like it's both encouraging and like enraging, right? Like progress is really slow, but it's being made. And I think right now we're in a time of great history, and there's a shift happening, and you can see it if you just walk outside or even look around this room.
One thing, thank you. One thing I didn't read from, there are many, many articles about equal rights for women, but it's not just equal rights, it's equal pay, equal opportunity, equal access to education. And when you think about how slow all of those issues, I mean, we don't have equal pay in any area. The city university, and only recently had the union say there has to be equal pay for the women faculty and the men. And I mean, within the last, 5 years, right, Marcia?
Before that, what's her name? Lilia, that she brought that lawsuit, Lilia Milani.
Lilia Milani.
That was 20 years.
She brought the lawsuit 20 years ago, but it,
It was settled in the 70s, I think. or the
oh,
80s,
okay.
yeah.
Well, it seems like
Equal pay for women, faculty.
equal pay for faculty. But it's really been slow, City University, maybe, I don't know if it's true at Columbia or NYU, but, okay. Yes,
Crystal, is there anybody today you can think of as the modern day Crystal Eastman? Is there anybody out there doing the kind of thing she did back in the 20s and before?
I don't know. And I travels the globe. Is there any woman?
Yes, of course. I think there's too many women out there who have actually been in the front line. I'm a friend of Blanche and Claire. My work is, I'm a humanitarian aid worker, so I have lived in Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria and Sudan and all of that. And after, hearing Blanche read all those mobilization we're talking about of mobilizing women against the war, that is happening now. I mean, there are so many women in the course of my work and living in countries in situations of war and armed conflict. I mean, the times I live in Syria or in Afghanistan have taught me that women will fight back. Women will get organized regardless of how hard the situation is. So, I mean, in this very conflicted situation we are now, I really respond to your question that yes, I have so many, not only personal friends, whether they are in Yemen or in Syria or in Afghanistan, other women are really out there in the front line fighting for the war. I mean, my friends in Palestine have paid a dear price for all this war, and yet what affects, I think what we need to understand in my experience, when a woman is hurt, or if a woman is raped, or there is sexual violence inflicted to her, she's not the only one who suffers. Her family suffers, her husband suffers, her parents suffer, her community suffers. So it is not an individualized pain, it is a community pain. And this is what is happening now in the world with all these wars, whether it's Ukraine or what's happening in Africa. So what Blanche is reading is so much bigger now because it's about movement building. It's about solidarity. So I mean, when we look at what's happening here in the United States and all that's happening in the campuses, it's a movement actually. And the problem is the press just look at it within the context of Columbia and NYU or UCLA in California. It's a movement. They're doing that in Paris, they're doing it in Europe, they're doing it in Asia. So we have to recognize that there is really a movement behind all this. And the beauty of it is that the movement doesn't have a single leader. It is spontaneous. It's really coming out from the heart of the people, of the students especially, who are out there in the front line. I remember I'm always an activist all my life. We always say that the line of fire is the place of honor, because that is where being in the front line meant. You're fighting out there and really struggling, and that is exactly what the students are doing now. And so I'm happy to tell you that yes, the women in Yemen are in the front line, the women in Palestine are in the front line. There are so many women out there, and the beauty of that, it is not an individualized leadership. It's a movement of people just standing up and saying no. So you don't need one woman to do that or one man to lead. The movement can be coming together, and we can all hold our hands, as Blanche always tells me, shoulder to shoulder, fist high. But
shoulder to shoulder, we will march together forward, shoulder to shoulder, hearts open, fists high. And Crystal understood that because that's why she created these movements. It wasn't about Crystal. It was about the ACLU and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, Alice Slater.
But we are in a moment right now. I mean, it's almost like what happened. It started Columbia like that. It got me off my seat to become an activist against the Vietnam War. When I saw what the kids were doing at Columbia, I said, I better do something. It made me a peace activist. And I think it's bigger than women now. It's yin and yang. There's like a lot of yangy women that came up through the system, and yin and men that are really good. I mean, we have to, I think we just have to broaden it. It's so much bigger, and it's a moment now, and we have to seize this moment. And we're living in the belly of it. We are the bad guys. We are the warriors. We're the heart of the capitalist corporate patriarchy. We're making a killing off a killing. Our media is totally corrupted. People don't even know what's going on. If you're not watching Amy Goodman.
You gotta watch Democracy Now!
No, but I'm saying people don't know.
Every morning, 8 o'clock.
I just want to say this thing. Ray McGovern is a former CIA agent. He went to Fordham. He's a New York boy. And he briefed Clinton and Bush every morning. He was tops. And he leaves and he forms VIPs. Veterans. Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. And he's in the peace movement. And he says to me, Alice, it's not the military-industrial complex. Remember Eisenhower, the general, gave us this warning? It's the Mickey Mat. I said, Ray, what is the Mickey Mat? The military-industrial, congressional, intelligence, media, academic think tank complex. They're all embedded, and they're all fashioning a message. And this is why it's so important that we're needing to get the word, and that the kids, and the other thing that's moving the kids is the climate. I mean, Mother Earth is really giving us a very good lesson right now.
Right. Talk about a global movement for a global reality.
Yeah.
That's the moment we're in.
Right, and it's happening now in a sense, so it's good that we're here to
Right.
support it.
Do you want to say something?
Joanne wants to say something.
Joanne?
I just ask. I must admit, I have not read the book, but I will. You know, I will read your books. Are there any women who look like me who, in those periods, because when you talk to women of color, they don't know, or they do know, but they don't see themselves. And just as in the student movements, how many people of color, and why is it not so that these young women of color, or even young men of color, are not involved? And what can we do to move that forward, that needle forward?
One thing is that Crystal Eastman and Claude McKay were very close. Claude McKay said that she was the most fabulous white woman he'd ever met. She stood for everything important, and we really have to support her work. And she and Claude McKay began to work together, and there's a group in the 20s of black poets and writers that are published in The Liberator and The Masses. So there is...
I don't know Claude McKay, so you have to educate me.
Okay. Great poet, a black poet, an essayist, activist. When did the NAACP get started? 1909? What? 1909. So they're all allies.
But the question is, what about blacks in this room?
In this room.
I can't hear you and I'm behind you, so.
What are you saying, Claire?
Oh, well, your question was, how can we get young people of color involved?
They are at the schools,
I think that's
one of them.
Look at the group here today.
Well, this is the old.
Yes, the older group, but when you, so what? I'm old too. But how can we do that? I tried to get women today because there's Sister International working with young blacks today and doing programs. And I would say, well, you know, why are there not more people of color involved in it? When I look at the students movement over the years, I have been since the Vietnam War. My grandfather worked with Eugene Debs. My mother has been an activist. She would be over 100 if she were alive. And still, I'm fighting the same battles that they fought and trying to interest young black people. They don't see a future. And there are, Black Lives Matter certainly did open, because now you see magazines where you see more black people, more people in architecture and industry and all the kinds of things. But still, today, there are only 4 of us here.
Well, some of us have read Jet magazine. So.
Yes, Jet magazine, but Jet magazine, that's true too, but we know those magazines.
Can I say a little something?
Yes.
Joanne, I wish I could bring all of the students from our current cohort in this room so you could meet them. I think especially this year, it's a very diverse group, including people who are studying African American Studies. Our NYU student is also president of the Association for African Development at her school, and our Niagara student is part of the Justice House there, where they promote racial justice and equity. It's really amazing how these students are able to connect racial issues with peace issues and militarism and climate change in a way that, you know, we haven't seen before in recent decades of this work. So,
well, they go back into their communities, though, into the communities where the people are. That's the most important thing.
Well, that's the goal, definitely, after they graduate, to be like still engaged and involved in these issues, but also in their communities too. And I would say some student groups are more engaged within the local community than others, but the ones that are incredibly engaged and out there and doing important work, especially in Niagara. So I wish that they could be here so that you could meet them, but they're really, really wonderful. And I'll just say one more quick thing about the students. Right now, they are putting their lives at stake, their careers at stake. Some of them have been suspended. This entire year, both semesters, they have been at odds with their university administration. telling them to be silent and to not speak up about these issues, and they're saying no. They're holding these sit-ins and walkouts and rallies and writing letters to our senators and raising funds for the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund and promoting peace everywhere. This is from Clarkson to Long Island to New York to Buffalo to Geneseo. It's really everywhere, and I'd say like this year especially, they just have not quit on calling for peace and calling for a ceasefire, and it just makes our work like so fulfilling and empowering. And
Amy Goodman brought the students back from the time of Vietnam, during the time of the Lords, and they're still fighting the same thing. They're still being expelled, and they're still speaking out. When is that going to change? When are we going to understand?
Well, it's changing. I mean, yeah.
It's changing, but it still exists. It's still the same thing.
But there's like this new energy. In other words, if they had it, then it got squelched.
It got squelched.
Powerful forces.
Yes.
They killed Martin Luther King. They killed Kennedy, and these are people that called it out. That we have.
Right.
How do you make them understand that it's so generation after generation, decade after decade? How do you make the American government understand?
We gotta get rid of this government. They're never gonna understand anything.
Okay, we'll come back. Yes.
Blanche, I just want to say, as a man, I'm privileged to hear you read those words, because those words are edifying for not only for the women, but for men too. And as Margaret was speaking, I was imagining myself hearing you in an encampment reading the bedrock of these words of history that bring strength. Because sometimes people think it's just beginning, and that what they're doing is somewhat new, but hearing this long hallway of history of what women have been doing is just a powerful, it's like medicine. And you know, when you hear that, somehow it girds you for it. Now, I'm speaking as a male, and I'm like digging this. And I, for one, you know, when the book get out, I want the book because I would like to share those words too. What I just heard you read is just a testimony to you, because I don't know who Eastman was. And had you not taken the time to bring her forth to the now moment, I still would not know. And so I'm just appreciative. This is an impregnated moment with those words, but they're so powerful. And I just thank you.
Thank you. Let me say that the good news is Oxford has just decided to put out a new printing of this. It's been basically in print since 1978. And, you know, we just need her now as much as ever. And so here we are.
Yeah, maybe somebody could get the clipboard from, and we can pass it around. I want to thank everybody for coming and being here. Maybe you'd like to talk about, do you want to continue asking Blanche some questions? Are there any other questions out here?
Thank you for educating us.
Yeah.
And being so wonderful always, whenever we call upon you, whether it's whatever, you educate us and you give us new hope.
Yeah, I read the book and loved it. I feel like she, you know, what she explains is things happen in actually when people get together and they discuss and they plan, and it can be maybe a very, if somebody else wrote about it, it might look like a very serious, boring meeting, but she went to the heart of the issues when she spoke about it and made it alive as you read it. That's what I got out of it.
And
all of these important things that were happening back in the 1915 to the 1920s that are our legacy now. And they could inform what we do now, because sometimes we beat around the bush. She did not beat around the bush.
No, she went straight in.
Straight to where the core of the issue and the decisions that have to be made that they were dealing with back then, and we're dealing with them now. But maybe we're not dealing with them as forthrightly as Crystal Eastman did, and we could benefit from her words.
Well, the kids are.
Yeah.
all at
The kids
The
are.
kids are.
I am part of Peace Action of Staten Island as part of a new coalition called Staten Island for Palestine. And it's mostly young people, and they've got signal groups and all this. And the back and forth and all of this is
That's great.
very, very lively and intense. And but we're up against, a system on Staten Island. Things are local. Staten Island, a lot of people work in government jobs. They work for not-for-profits. They're afraid to speak. They're afraid to say anything. We don't have one elected official. I just learned that there's one, besides the Unitarian Church of Staten Island, I learned about another faith leader who is going to the May 1st Labor Day pro-Palestinian rally today. But only, as far as I know, only 2 faith leaders on Staten Island have spoken out about Palestine. Only 2 out of hundreds and hundreds, many of them involved with interfaith. I think that's a microcosm of what's happening around the country. People are afraid because their jobs, the organizations they're part of.
Look what just happened in Congress. I mean, the Republicans were saving our lives. They weren't going to vote the war for Gaza, for Ukraine, for Taiwan. And the Democrats ganged up with the Republicans to screw everybody, right? And keep all the wars going.
Maybe
we have people
exactly.
are so terrified of Trump, but I mean, give me a break. Biden is doing 3 wars.
I don't know, Emily, if you could give us a little rundown of what we did in Washington, D.C., just as ceasefire advocacy, you might be interested. We were knocking on those doors, and we ran into.
You want to stand up?
I'm okay sitting and talking. But yeah, just a few weeks ago, Sally and myself, Tara, and a couple other folks from Peace Action and from the National Iranian American Council and Friends Committee on National Legislation and other groups were down in Washington, D.C. for grassroots ceasefire advocacy days. There were about 30 of us from New York City that went down to D.C. for these days. I think, the entire coalition had over 600 people, over 100 meetings, so it was really incredible to be part of that. And in New York, we were able to meet with Senator Gillibrand and Schumer's offices and with Bowman, Velasquez, Goldman, Malliotakis. Oh my gosh, I should have written the list down. Who else?
Goldman.
We couldn't get a meeting with Nadler, so we knocked on his
had
door.
a video today, Medea Benjamin, where they're feeling her up and searching her, and Nadler's walking past and he won't even turn around and talk to her.
Oh, it's terrible. That's disgusting.
We should show up in his office here.
Yes, we got to show up here, we got to show up in DC, but we had these meetings with as many offices as we could in New York, asking them to call for a ceasefire, asking them to halt aid and weapons sales to Israel while they're committing great human rights abuses, asking them to restore funding to UNRWA and expand humanitarian aid funding, and asking them to speak out against the risk of a wider regional war, which we've seen is already happening. Right. But it could be so much worse. So I think being there in DC, talk about the belly of the beast, the belly of the beast, and see how many people are unwilling to say anything at all. Gillibrand's office, we met with them in December. She wasn't doing anything. I said, all this time has passed. Schumer's even made a speech. Pelosi's talked about conditioning aid. Does she have anything new to say? And the answer was essentially no. So we need more leaders that have courage. And as Joanne was saying and talking about, people of color and being involved in this, the only 3 Congress people in New York that have signed on to the ceasefire now resolution are Representatives Bowman, Ocasio-Cortez, and Velasquez. Velasquez is one of the first, or maybe the first, Puerto Rican woman in Congress. Bowman, as we know, is an incredible black congressman. AOC is a young woman of color. And I think that they're not as scared because they see the connections and they have political integrity. We might not agree with them on everything, but at least they're willing to make those connections and speak up for what they agree on.
They're still a little scared. I mean,
they are scared. And right now we really have to make sure we protect people like Bowman as APAC runs, you know, a challenger against him, has a challenger against AOC. Summer Lee winning her primary, I think, was a great positive message to say we can't be scared of this lobby group or of the political cost. We have to do what's right. And I think as that continues to grow, as we continue to put pressure on them, that's going to be really important. Things like in the primary campaign, the Leave It Blank campaign in New York, we had about 12% of votes across the state leaving blank ballots as protests against Biden and his handling of this war. Exactly. It's 12% across the state. I think it was 22% in Goldman's district, 24% in Clark's district. I think it's almost 15 just in New York City alone. And these are huge numbers. And when we were in DC mentioning the primaries, these were things when we mentioned that the staffers were writing down. So I think they're paying attention, but we need to make clear that this is not something that we're gonna let go. This is incredibly important. And I think that it is, you know, I think that the biggest leaders and voices I see leading in this moment are Muslim women, are Palestinian women, are Black women. And I think, you know, even just seeing the outsized police presence at Columbia, there's so many talking points from the Black Lives Matter protests that are still extremely applicable. These are students who have grown up, you know, like doing active shooter drills in their school, and now it's guns being pointed against them from the police. And the tactics that they have learned have been from past protest movements. We've seen exchanges between Black Lives Matter protests and protesters in Gaza, exchanging what to do about tear gas. And I think it's that international, that global movement, that global lens that we really need to be sharing tips, to be explaining how we stand up against this behemoth.
And you just speak to Adams.
Interesting to think of them growing up with active shooter drills.
Yeah, he's and this is like technically a Democratic mayor, right?
Right.
Well,
the code of blue.
So they say.
he's really a blue mayor.
You know, the Democrats are great on abortion, gay rights, but when it comes to the military and Big Pharma, and then forget it, there's no difference. It's one party.
Yeah.
It's one party.
And they're all taking their campaign contributions from the
And
state.
they're all corrupt.
I'm calling on you.
I'd like to.
No, sorry. Yeah.
I'd like to say two different things. One is, I wonder whether those of us who are older can play a role in supporting the students if we're alumni, to be writing lots of letters as alumni saying we're absolutely disgusted with the institutions that we graduated from. And the other thing is totally unrelated, but
A little louder.
I've been an activist for justice in Palestine for over 40 years. And in the beginning, you couldn't get 10 people in a room to agree with you. What is happening now is really remarkable because they're not only putting themselves on the line, but they are frankly speaking about the atrocities that are going on, and they're not intimidated by the kind of bullshit weaponization of anti-Semitism. I say this as a Jew. And to me, it's the best of times and the worst of times, because this movement is absolutely remarkable, especially looking at it from what has happened up until now. And the other side of it is the horrible price that the Palestinians have paid to make it so clear.
Right. Sherry Gorelick, if you don't know who that is, it's Sherry Gorelick, and she's written some important things.
And Margaret might be able to respond to the first question about what we can do to support the students.
I think alumni voices are really important in this moment. I mentioned that I went to Fordham Lincoln Center. They just started an encampment today, and there's a call out for alumni to email alumni relations, say we're not going to donate any money, or be involved at all as long as this is the university's response to their own students. And I think that's important, whatever institution that you went to, they really care about donations, right? Like any other corporation, I guess, right? Like they want their money, they want their alum. So I think alumni voices are really important in this moment. Definitely reach out to whatever contacts you have at the university. I know a lot of universities also have sign-on letters or different things of that nature. So definitely encourage you to reach out to whatever school you went to, and encourage your friends to reach out to whatever schools they went to as well. I know Blanche was faculty at John Jay, so reaching out as CUNY and SUNY professors I think is really important, and any connection you have to a school, I think being able to leverage that is incredibly important in this moment. And
Are
something
they
students should
demonstrating
call
like
for.
at Queens College where I went to Hunter? I mean, I know it just started.
Not yet.
It's not yet, right?
CUNY.
But at City College, though.
In City, they are, the
I know Hunter, like we have student organizers at the Macaulay Honors College, which spans the CUNY network. So they have some of their students are at City College. Hunter College just got back from spring break, so I don't think they've had a chance
They had a
to.
demo today at noon.
That's great.
Hunter did?
Hunter did?
No, John Jay.
John Jay did. But
John Jay demonstrated today?
That's what I heard here since
Oh, good.
Yeah. So I think there's some form of action. It might not be an encampment, but I think every campus has at least some form of action happening, and it's important that we are backing those students, because I think things like these mass arrests are frightening, right? Especially as students are trying to graduate or get a job. So I think they need to know that they have our support.
Yeah.
Do we do like a college watch in the network to have like a whole list of what colleges are now demonstrating, so we can look it up?
The only person, only Democracy Now! Has been covering yeah.
Yeah.
What does?
Teen Vogue.
Teen Vogue, but it's Democracy Now!, you know.
I brought with me today a couple hundred copies of the War Resistance League pie chart that shows where our money goes, and sadly, much of it goes to war. Take some, pass them out to others, and encourage them to be part of the anti-war movement.
Thank you. Great. Thank you so much.
You know, how many people here know about our campus organizing program? I don't know if, does anybody not know about it? Would you like Emily to give a little spiel, Margaret to give a quick little spiel to let you know what it is and how long?
Yes.
Would you do that?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And just so you know, we need your help to keep it going. And, you know, you could talk to me or Sylvia about how you can help.
That's what's asking you, and please don't leave. These are so important. You listen to Blanche, and she's brilliant, but we need your help for our programs, for the student program, for the voter campaigns, to get these people out who don't agree with human interests and human lives. And so we need you. You've been marvelous, generous this evening. Open your pocketbooks again. You see the donation can outside. Please write a check, and we will be able to continue the programs and to continue doing things like we do today. We don't give an honorarium. She comes because she loves us, because she's willing to educate. Larry Whitner comes, all the members of the board, but they still come because they love us and they believe in the fight. But that fight cannot stop without you and without dollars to promote it and to help us and to make the students' reality become a reality in real life. Thank you. Donate, please. Well, we had Emily's in the morning.
I was hoping,
Ashley's.
I got a pocket. It'll go in the right place, I promise.
Okay, I have a contribution here in memory of my friend and longtime Peace Action Manhattan member, Marcy Sarch, who died a few weeks ago at her son's home in New Jersey, and I'm sure she would appreciate not only the contribution from me, but contribution from others as well.
Remember.
So I don't know who, Margaret's gonna do it. Okay, tell us, what's this campus organizing program?
The campus organizing program as part of the Peace Action Fund of New York State is just one of the hallmarks of the work that we do here. As Emily was saying before, like it's just one of the best parts of our work. We have this stipended program for students because it cannot be an unpaid internship because they work too hard. We have 12 campus chapters across the state, like I said, from Potsdam, Long Island, Buffalo, Rochester, Geneseo, New York City. And we encourage these students to promote peace on their own campuses in how they choose. We give them sovereignty to come up with their own unique initiatives. Sometimes it centers around climate change. For example, our Pace University chapter has totally rebuilt their campus garden after protesting its destruction. And now they're using that campus garden to grow vegetables and flowers and donate those vegetables to a local shelter. For example, we have our Stony Brook chapter that is actively protesting and calling for a ceasefire. They had an encampment and now many of them are suspended because of that. Many, a few months ago, were arrested in a peaceful sit-in calling for a divestment from their university administration. So we really allow these students to just explore the peace issues that they're passionate about. We're able to provide resources, speakers for events, legal resources where needed, and we both help kind of facilitate that throughout the semester. And like I said before, this is a stipended program, and it takes money, it takes help from the whole network, the whole community, but it's amazing to see these students just follow their passion, learn something every week, and just be able to bring peace and bring these conversations right to their campus and community.
Adopt the chapter, $500 in stipend, $500. Adopt the chapter.
$500 per semester, so.
Per semester, that's $1,000.
Yeah.
It's worth it, because they will bring change like you have been doing it.
The program's existed since 2011 when Don Schaefer gave the first, convinced a friend to give the initial, he's a great, he's a great man. I wish I had a chance to meet him, but he convinced a friend to give the seed money to launch our student organizing program. And our first chapter was up at SUNY Geneseo in 2012. They're still going strong. They work closely with their sister chapter, Genesee Valley Citizens for Peace. And we've had hundreds of students go through the program since then, and it's gone through a lot of different iterations, but it's always been stipended. It has the support of a student and campaigns coordinator or other staff member. Margaret has bi-weekly check-in calls with the students. We have monthly student network-wide conference calls where we give updates from our state office, and students also get a chance to talk to each other and share what's really working on their campuses or what's not working. Sometimes they come up with joint initiatives. Was it last semester that they came up with a joint statement on Palestine? That's really incredible. It's on our website if you'd like to see it. We like to hold a student conference once a year, usually in the fall. In spring, Margaret and I hit the road and go on an upstate campus tour, as Blanche was saying, to visit all of the different campuses, see them on their home turf, get to meet with some of their members as well. So the student program, I think, is, as Margaret said,
And your international webinar, tell them about that.
We have international webinars. I'm also a member of the International Peace Bureau's board, and it's been really wonderful to be able to give our students global resources, access to global experts and speakers to talk about whatever issues they're working on campus. As Margaret said, we give them free rein to work on what they think is most pressing on their campus and in their community, but we also really illustrate the connections between whatever it is they're working on and militarism and nuclear weapons and the importance of abolition. And I think that's what's really unique about our program, is that we're able to kind of give them that global view that Crystal Eastman talked about and so many others, and keep it also very local sometimes on their chapters, working on issues that are affecting their campus and their community.
You've also gotten them very involved in attending UN events and when they come to New York City, so it's really wonderful exposure for them.
Yes.
I just got an email that the police have cleared out forums in Camden.
Oh, really? So fast?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
The police have cleared out the fordham in Camden. She was telling us.
Oh,
Yeah.
And that was fast.
terrible.
They had had occupied a building also, and they had occupied a building with tents inside. I received a call earlier, and they had taken over a building, and they were setting up tents in the inside the building and outside also, and so staff was asked to stay late, so.
There was one school that settled it, Brown, that they.
Brown.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Right. They're going to have a vote to divest. Yeah. Tara.
It's noted as a leftist university.
Sorry?
Communists go to Brown.
Rich communists, I guess. I also wanted to say something on behalf of Peace Action itself, that as Sally mentioned earlier, I'm the downstate co-chair, and I'm thrilled that there's so many people tonight that I hadn't met before, and I'm happy to meet you all. And I would encourage you all to become members of Peace Action. Even though many of us are older, we're not going to go out and do encampments, but there are things that we can do. And it would be great to have lists of people that, when we need calls to be made to congressional offices, for instance, that we have people that we can email and say, you've got to call this office today, and you've got to call them again tomorrow, and you have to call them again the next day. It does make a difference. I was with Emily in Washington a couple of weeks ago, and we met with Jamal Bowman himself, and I asked him, what's effective in contacting your office? Is it better to write a letter, send an email? And he said, call. It's when the phones are ringing off the hook that we know that something is going on. Call. That's something that everybody in this room can do. And
That's
so
great.
I would encourage you all to become members of Peace Action New York State, and also respond. Tell us, look, put me on the list that I want to know when there's an action alert and we need calls out to get the congressperson to sign on to a letter, to become a co-sponsor of a bill, to say, don't you dare vote money for Palestine. That you will be among the people, calling off the hook. And if you want to get involved in other ways, that would be great too. But I know that everybody in this room can make a phone call.
Yes.
And can make a phone call every day.
Your membership will get you the letter.
Thank you.
Tell you about the
Sherry?
I'll call Fordham tomorrow morning, and that's something we could all, say. Also, is to call Fordham's president's office, and even if you just get the voicemail, leave a long message about how ashamed they should be to be treating students like that. And do that with the other
And ask for
colleges, too.
divestment, put that in the ask.
Yeah, Sherry.
Jewish Voice for Peace has what they call a power half hour. I wish they needed something else. But at 3 o'clock every weekday for half an hour, they hold a Zoom meeting, and it focuses on the same thing and they give you like scripts and stuff, and they have one of these email things to call your representatives or whoever they're asking to call.
Great.
And it doesn't take a lot of time,
And we should all do it.
yeah.
Mary, our host, has a comment.
I'd like to say, I'm glad Emily mentioned Don Schaefer, because Don Schaefer is the person who got me involved with Peace Action maybe 20 years ago or so, when he spoke about his vision of getting young people involved in this, and this was the only way we were going to be able to build the peace movement, democratic peace politics, and so forth. So I took his word for it and got involved, and as little as I have, whatever, but I'm so glad that his vision has worked out, because I think, you know, what Peace Action has done with the campuses is unique among liberal political organizations these days.
He was my political mentor on Long Island. He was running Gene McCarthy, lived in Great Neck, and he was like all in Nassau County, and I was in Massapequa. So, you know, he was like calling the shots all the time, you know.
Oh, I knew that. Well, I knew Don Schaefer through Democratic politics.
That's how I knew it. That guy, you know, that was our peace leader.
Sure.
He was our godfather who got us the speakers for the nation in Westchester County, and we started out at a $500 and down, and we would get people to, we sometimes raised $10,000, and not because we were a wealthy county, because people believed in peace and people believed in things, and he helped us promote it. Nichols and she was just honored by us last year. Katrina Vanderbilt. She couldn't come because she was in Russia, but she sent someone else. But he was our godfather for getting speakers in Westchester, and we raised money. And you can do house parties just like Madam Geisman did, and help raise money for Peace Action, because you believe in Peace Action and you believe in the mission of the young people today. You are keeping the baton going, keeping young people going. So without you, we don't exist, but with them, they are our future.
Yeah, Congressman Owen is in a battle for his seat against right-wing Republicans, and he needs not only phone calls, but he needs money to campaign.
Yes.
And so anyone who can campaign, Bowman or other progressive candidates who are on the verge of losing their seats and thus having Congress turn to be Republican rather than at least the House being a Democratic. Please do so.
The threat in the beginning was he and Mondaire Jones had the wealthy Westchester counties, Bronxville, Scarsdale, Hartsdale, and never before they always had Anita Lowy, who we knew who worked, and Elliot Engel. We fought because of the Israeli issue, but he was good at other issues. And they never had two people who looked like me who were running these filthy rich areas, and that disturbed people. And they did not want it, but he won. He won. Jamal Bowman won. And he does it just like when it came to the vaccines for Palestine. He spoke out, and people did not like that. And so they have even put black candidates up against him that don't hold a candle to him. Or they make that whole thing about bringing the bell on the fire alarm, and they do it in the papers. So we've got to support people who are not afraid, whose economic stability is not damaged or is not threatened, because they will threaten you. The Democratic Party will threaten you, and they'll do you in.
Yes, you had your hand up, Mr. Jones.
I was just going to I was going to pile on with Don. Don I consider him a mentor, and I learned a lot about what really the process, I understand the process, but Don also acquainted me with some of the underpinnings of the process, and out of that I came up with the slogan that I use often, which is no money, no message.
Yes.
So the way our system works on money. And many young people don't recognize, they don't realize what it takes. When I was a kid, I used to see I would go to, I won't name the names of the people, but they were middle-class people, upper middle-class people of the black persuasion. And they would raise money for the Congress people. And the money, we would have the money in brown paper bags. And that's how we would take that money to the candidates, and those candidates would run. Well, they thankfully outlawed that sort of thing in New York now. But I remember when that was also the process here. That money went in an envelope or in a brown paper bag, and you moved it around, et cetera, in order to accomplish your objectives. So Donald was, he was a realistic person. He did a lot of things in the Berkshires that were very effective, very effective. We had the young professor.
Peter Beinart, he brought Peter Beinart to the Berkshires. Peter Beinart has been a great spokesman. He actually has changed a lot of his positions since he spoke in the Berkshires.
Yes, from that time, yes.
Every year.
Yeah, and he had the representative of the Palestinians at the UN. He spoke. Somebody from Peace Now. So he brought the issue of Palestine to the Berkshires, and he'd fill up a room. 300 people.
Yeah.
He would rent. He was a force. He was definitely a force.
Education.
You couldn't say no to Dawn, and maybe. We need to remember that we don't want people to say no to us. We have to have that same energy.
We were organizing for McCarthy. That's how it started with Dawn. And then Bobby Kennedy got into the race, and we didn't know what are we going to do. He said, just let's keep working for me. He just was so cool. And then, of course, Bobby got shot. So,
yeah.
But, I mean, it was like, he just said, we got to stick with it. We'll just stay with it. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, he had a lot of experience. Yeah. Well, I think we should finish up some of that food in there.
Yes.
And the wine. And thank Blanche.
Thank you. What a joy it is to work with Peace Action. So I'm just telling you, everyone in the group is fabulous. You'll all have a good time if you become members and activists. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I think most of the people here
are with us too.
Thank you. Thank you so much.